Listen Radio. This is nationwide at 5, the real big show, the company's flagship program. Welcome to all of you on the 90 FM band. And if you are joining us over there on YouTube, top of the afternoon to you as well. Good to have you with us. We're inside the cover story. And in the cover story, we want to turn our attention to the Auditor General's report on procurement, in response to Hurricane Mellisa. Some concerns are being raised by the Auditor General, and according to our reportage, which you've heard earlier in the newscast, a real-time audit conducted by the country's Auditor General, Pamela Monroe-Ellis, has raised serious concerns about the management and operation of key aspects of the Holness administration's response to Hurricane Mellisa. In a report tabled in the House of Representatives on Tuesday, that is today, Mrs. Monroe-Ellis cited governance failures, weak oversight, and overall breaches of the procurement rules. She's warning that the shortcomings in management systems undermined transparency and accountability during one of Jamaica's most expensive disaster relief efforts. Here's Siobhan Campbell with our initial report, and then we'll read excerpts from the report as tabled in the nation's parliament.
The 28-page report is the result of a real-time examination of how resources were managed under the Hurricane Mellisa Relief Initiative. Focus was placed on the National Disaster Fund, emergency procurement by the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, Odpem, and the acquisition, distribution of Starlink devices and inventory management practices. The report found that the National Disaster Fund Committee, NDFC, the statutory body responsible for overseeing the fund, has not fulfilled its mandate. The committee last met in June 2022, its term expired in September 2023, and no replacement had been appointed as of December 2025. Mrs. Monroe-Ellis says this placed the management of the fund outside the framework required by law. The Auditor General says Section 40 of the Disaster Risk Management Act requires the Financial Secretary to approve withdrawals from the National Disaster Fund after consulting the NDFC. But at the time, the Director General of Odpem requested $350 million for Hurricane Mellisa relief. No committee had been appointed. The audit also flagged weaknesses in emergency procurement practices. Odpem awarded contracts valued at $85 million for hurricane supplies, but failed to publish the contracts on the Government of Jamaica Electronic Procurement GOGEP platform within the 1-month deadline mandated by law. The Auditor General says a sample of the contracts found that all but one was in line with the procurement guidelines. The total sample was valued at $81 million. One of the most significant findings related to the $12 million procurement of 200 Starlink satellite internet devices. The Auditor General found that the purchase was initiated by the instruction of the Energy and Telecommunications Minister, Darrell Vaz, rather than by the head of the procuring entity. This, she says, was contrary to the Public Procurement Act. The devices were also delivered on November 14, before procurement documentation was completed, with key forms prepared retroactively on November 19. Auditors also found that many of the Starlink devices procured were not used. Physical inspection conducted at 8 entities revealed that all 41 devices issued remained unused and in storage. Additionally, 5 entities did not record the Starlink devices in their asset inventories, and 3 municipal corporations reported that the devices had not been entered into municipal inventory listings, but were issued directly to the respective councillors. A further inspection of 41 devices observed that all the units were equipped with European 2-pin electrical plugs, requiring adapters for use. Mrs. Monroe-Ellis says as of January 6, 2026, 80 out of 200 Starlink devices remained in storage at the Jamaica Constabulary Force. The audit also found that food items, tarpaulins, and water valued at nearly $60 million were not recorded in Odpem's inventory system, despite earlier audits warning about similar weaknesses. The report says Odpem acknowledged that its inventory systems were incomplete and still being updated at the time of the audit. Siobhan Campbell for Nationwide News.
Thank you very much for that report there, Siobhan. We are going to now turn listeners, viewers, to some of the key findings, yeah, and there are some questions here for the Holness administration to respond to, given the findings of the Auditor General. Of course, I see some of our YouTubers saying these things, these procurement efforts are taking place against the backdrop of an emergency. And while I am sympathetic to that, listeners, viewers, we must also realize that an emergency isn't a reason, a blanket reason to abandon, the rules. We can't, that's anarchy. We can't be given to that. Now, we want to turn our attention now to the key findings, under the National Disaster Fund Committee, key findings relating to the National Disaster Fund Committee. The Auditor General reports the National Disaster Fund Committee, NDFC, did not effectively oversee the management of the National Disaster Fund. The committee mandated to provide policy oversight, general administration, and effective management of the National Disaster Fund convened only twice during its tenure, with the last meeting held in June 2022. Now given Jamaica's position, geographic position, and how we are impacted by disasters, for the National Disaster Fund to the NDF to be convened only twice during its tenure, with the last meeting held in June 2022, raises several questions. The report goes on to say the committee was appointed in September 2020 and its term expired in September 2023. However, as of December 2025, there was no evidence of any new appointments indicating non-compliance with the requirements of the Disaster Risk Management Act. That's the DRM Act. We found, says the Auditor General, that the National Disaster Fund Guidelines document, which is intended to support the administration of the NDF, remained in draft as at December 2025. In January 2026, Odpem responded that it will, quote, make the necessary representation to the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service regarding the appointment of a new funded committee, and will conclude its review of the draft committee guidelines no later than January 30, 2026, and submit them for signature by the appropriate authority. In Section 40 of the DRM Act, says the report, Section 40 requires the Financial Secretary to approve withdrawals from the National Disaster Fund after consulting the NDFC. However, at the time, the Director General of Odpem requested $350 million for Hurricane Mellisa relief efforts. No committee had been appointed, which is why the committee needs to be in place. The Financial Secretary, the report says, subsequently approved the withdrawal of the $350 million from the NDF. The Director General of Odpem submitted the withdrawal request, acting in the capacity of Secretary to the National Disaster Risk Management Council to support critical relief activities, including food distribution, municipal supplies, and National Emergency Operations Center, NEOC, operations following the passage of Hurricane Mellisa on October 28, 2025. We're going to pause it there. We're up on our break inside the cover story. We're going to take the break and come back inside the cover story, pardon me, and we're looking at a real-time audit conducted by the country's Auditor General, Pamela Monroe Ellis, raising serious concerns about the management and operation of key aspects of the Holness administration's response to Hurricane Mellisa. Before we went to the break, we got to the section of the report talking about the $350 million that was requested. And of course, the Director General of Odpem submitted the withdrawal request for the funds, acting in the capacity of Secretary to the National Disaster Risk Management Council to support critical relief efforts because of an issue with the committee being in place. Now, the report went on to tell us that the Director General of Odpem, in a letter to the Financial Secretary dated October 28, 2025, stated that the Odpem had identified areas of intervention through coordination with local authorities and other stakeholders during pre- and post-disaster planning. In January 2026, Odpem reported that consultations had occurred through operational meetings of the NEOC and verbal engagements with the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. Odpem, the report says, despite our request, has not provided meeting minutes, says the Auditor General. So this claim is being made by the Auditor General's department that Odpem, despite its request, has not provided meeting minutes nor documentary evidence to support its representation that consultation was held with local authorities and key stakeholders. So where are those minutes? Purchases funded by the National Disaster Fund was also addressed. And under that heading, the report reads, Odpem did not publish the awarded emergency contracts on the Government of Jamaica electronic procurement platform within the mandated 1 month period. Of course, we know that it's been more than 3 months now since the passage of Hurricane Mellisa, and it says that Odpem did not publish the awarded emergency contracts on the Government of Jamaica's electronic procurement platform within the mandated 1 month period as required by the Public Procurement Amendment Act of 2025. Our review, says the report, of Odpem's contract documentation for Hurricane Mellisa relief activities identified 25 procurements valued at $85.6 million as of December 17, 2025. From this population, we sampled 10 contracts totaling $81 million and found that 9 of the 10, totaling $67 million, were supported by the required eligibility documents and had received the appropriate approval from the head of the entity. That's good news right there. Odpem, the report goes on to say, applied the emergency procurement methodology and the documented justifications complied with the Procurement Act and its accompanying regulations. The details of the contracts were not published on the GoJEP platform. We're concerned with one contract, says the Auditor General's Department, is detailed in paragraph 4. Following our report to Odpem regarding the absence of publication on the GoJEP platform as at January 21, 2026, 6 out of the 10 sampled contracts have since been published. And of course, that's a noted response there from Odpem, and the remaining contracts need to be published as well. The report goes on to say, viewers, that the Auditor General says that it noted that the procurement of 200 Starlink devices valuing $12.12 million was initiated by way of a ministerial instruction. Yeah, let me read that again. The Auditor General's Department says that it noted that the procurement of 200 Starlink devices valuing $12.12 million was initiated by way of ministerial instruction and not by the Odpem's Director General, contravening the Public Procurement Act of 2015, which assigns direct responsibility for all procurement activities to the head of the procuring entity. Our review of correspondences revealed that the procurement activity was initiated by a letter from the Minister of Energy, Transport and Telecommunications in his capacity as the co-chair of the Relief and Recovery Oversight Committee on November 13, 2025, to the attention of the Director General for payment to be made by Odpem for the 200 devices to supplier number 1. The report goes on to say, however, only the head of the entity is legally empowered to initiate procurement. And let me read it again for all of our listeners and viewers. The Auditor General is reminding the country that only the head of the entity is legally empowered to initiate procurement, and there is no provision under the Public Procurement Act that allows the minister to approve or initiate commitments to select suppliers or vendors, or to give any directive to Odpem as to which supplier to pay. The Starlink devices were bought using funds from the $350 million withdrawal requested by the financial secretary, but they were not listed among the items that supported this request. And of course, the minister, Daryl Vaz, has to respond to this finding by the Auditor General. Why, in contravention of the law, as being claimed here by the Auditor General, did that directive come from the Minister of Technology? Daryl Vaz is usually very responsive, and we hope to, the public needs to hear from Daryl Vaz on this matter. Under another point, the report goes on to say the Starlink devices were delivered to the Office of the Commissioner of Police on November 14, 2025. However, it was noted that the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, Odpem, began preparing the required procurement documentation, internal emergency procurement requisition form on November 19, 2025, 5 days subsequent to delivery. The requisition form, which documents the procurement request, approvals, justification for emergency procurement, supplier selection, and risk assessment, was created retrospectively to formalize the process. It happened afterwards, is what the Auditor General is saying. Our review, the report goes on to say, determined that 120 devices were distributed among 17 entities. Of these, 13 entities confirmed receipt of a total of 86 devices. Physical inspections conducted at 8 entities revealed all 41 issued devices remained unused and in storage. Additionally, 5 entities, the report says, did not record the Starlink devices in their asset inventories, and 3 municipal corporations reported that the devices had not been entered into the municipal inventory listings, but were issued directly to respective councillors. Yeah, now it wasn't recorded, but it was issued directly to respective councillors. We need to get an understanding of that as well. Questions there to be answered. And of course, the report goes on to say, conversely, the Jamaica Customs Agency, JCA, indicated that although the agency received 3 devices, measures are being implemented to render them operational. The JCA further informed us, says the Auditor General, that the devices' power supplies are of European specification, necessitating the replacement of power adapters to meet local requirements at an additional cost. Upon examination, the report says, of 41 devices, we observed that all units were equipped with European 2-pin electrical plugs requiring adapters for use. The report goes on to say, as of January 6, 2026, 80 out of 200 Starlink devices remained in storage at the Jamaica Constabulary Force, JCF. Of course, we're reading for you excerpts from the Auditor General's report looking at some procurement activity in response to Hurricane Mellisa. Under inventory management, the report says food items, tarpaulin, and water purchased at a total cost of $59.6 million were not recorded in Odpem's inventory or stores records. Odpem lacked an effective system for accurately recording, tracking, and periodically reconciling goods and assets acquired, which is essential to ensure accountability, sound management oversight, and reliable financial reporting. This issue persists despite recommendations from the Auditor General's Department in a report published in July 2024, which highlighted the weaknesses and implications associated with deficiencies in inventory management. Furthermore, the report says robust inventory procedures are mandated by the Disaster Risk Management Act. Odpem reported that its warehouse inventory operates as a paper-first system. Items received and issued are initially documented on receipt and issue vouchers before the details are entered into the computerized inventory management system. We're about 2 minutes out from having to close, but the report goes on to say this practice differs from previous information provided to us, which indicated that the Sage 300 software was used for inventory management. Nonetheless, we found no evidence, says the Auditor General, that inventory records had been updated accordingly. Odpem stated that its inventory system would be updated by January 9, 2026. But as of now, this process remains incomplete and no timeline for full implementation has been provided. By way of recommendation, we might only be able to get through one. The Auditor General says the Cabinet, on the advice of the Minister, should take urgent steps to appoint the National Disaster Fund Committee to ensure full compliance with the DRM Act. Prompt establishment of the committee will strengthen oversight of the fund and enable the Financial Secretary to benefit from the statutory requirement for consultation prior to approving any withdrawals. Another recommendation, additionally, Odpem should improve inventory management and transparency. This includes maintaining complete asset records, using standardized pre-numbered requisition forms for all relief requests, and finalizing and implementing the inventory management standard operating procedures. Odpem should publish all procurement activities as required under the Public Procurement Act to promote accountability, transparency, and public access to information. We will have to leave it there. There are a number of other recommendations in the report, but we are out of time. Yeah, we were reading for you excerpts from the Auditor General's real-time audit into the operations of the Holness administration in terms of their response to Hurricane Mellisa, and several questions are being raised. One of them that a directive came from the Minister in contravention of what the law allows, and of course the Technology Minister would need to respond to that. This has been the cover story.